The tangled web of friendships and alliances surrounding Catherine Howard offers a captivating glimpse into the lives of women navigating the treacherous Tudor court. In a world where trust could mean survival, and betrayal, swift ruin, these companions were more than mere attendants. They were lifelines, confidantes, and sometimes unwitting players in a deadly game of power. Their stories reveal not only the strength and solidarity forged between women under immense pressure but also the fragile balance between loyalty and political necessity. As we delve into the hidden lives behind the Queen's public persona, we uncover a world of intimate bonds and precarious alliances that shaped, and ultimately unraveled, the fate of one of England's most tragic queens. Catherine Howard's childhood was shaped by a world of shifting fortunes and uncertain circumstances that deeply influenced the circle of people who surrounded her in her earliest years. Born around 1523-24 into the powerful Howard family, Catherine's early environment was marked by both privilege and vulnerability. The Howard family was one of the most influential noble houses in Tudor England, with strong connections to the royal court and a turbulent history of political ambition and downfall. Despite their prominence, Catherine's immediate upbringing was far from stable, involving a patchwork of households and guardianship arrangements that introduced her to a diverse and often precarious social world. From a very young age, Catherine's life was split between different locations, primarily Lambeth Palace in London and various country estates in Norfolk. Lambeth Palace, traditionally the London residence of the Archbishop of Canterbury, was one of the places where Catherine spent formative years, especially while she was under the care of her grandmother, the Dowager Duchess of Norfolk. This environment provided Catherine with access to a circle of attendants, ladies-in-waiting, and young noble girls who were part of the household or temporarily attached to it. It was in this setting that many of Catherine's earliest companions were introduced to her, including both peers and older female attendants who acted as caretakers and role models. In Norfolk, the Howard family's ancestral home and power base, Catherine was surrounded by a slightly different social milieu. The country estates were large centers of local influence, hosting a retinue of servants, tutors, and noble guests. Here, the young Catherine mingled with children of other noble families, servants, and women who attended to her daily needs. The contrast between the urban, more formal environment of Lambeth and the rural, sprawling estates in Norfolk exposed Catherine to a range of social dynamics and relationships that would shape her understanding of loyalty, friendship, and social hierarchy. Among the most significant figures in Catherine's early life were the women who directly cared for her: nannies, attendants, and governesses, who not only ensured her physical well-being but also played an important role in shaping her education and behavior. These women often came from noble or gentle families themselves, carefully chosen to provide the appropriate guidance and influence on a young noblewoman destined for a life at court. However, historical records suggest that not all of these caretakers were exemplary in their conduct or loyalties. In fact, some of Catherine's early guardians had reputations that would later cast shadows over her own life. For example, the woman who oversaw Catherine's household before she joined the royal court, the Dowager Duchess of Norfolk's niece, Catherine Cat, or sometimes called Lady Shelton, has been described in some sources as a strict and politically motivated figure. These caretakers, though responsible for shaping Catherine's formative years, also introduced her to complex networks of loyalty and rivalry that mirrored the larger political intrigues of the Tudor court. Catherine's early friendships with other girls were shaped by these household dynamics and the social positioning of those around her. Unlike later, more formal friendships formed at court, these childhood relationships were often informal, fluid, and influenced by household hierarchies and proximity. Some of these companions were peers from noble families whose parents served or were allied with the Howards, while others were lower in status but played important social roles as attendants or ladies-in-waiting in training. The friendships among young noble girls often formed around shared activities, education, and play, but they were also deeply affected by the ambitions and influence of their families. The Howard household itself was a microcosm of Tudor society, with its intricate layers of service, patronage, and political maneuvering. Children raised within it were acutely aware of their social standing and the expectations placed upon them. For Catherine, her early companions included cousins and distant relatives who were part of this wider family network, as well as daughters of loyal retainers who served the Howards. These relationships, though personal, were also political, as alliances formed through friendship could later influence marriages, court appointments, and political loyalty. Education during Catherine's childhood was overseen by tutors and governesses who aimed to prepare her for a role as a noblewoman and potential royal consort. Unlike her predecessor Anne Boleyn, whose education was rigorous and humanist, Catherine's schooling was reportedly less extensive and more focused on accomplishments considered suitable for women of her status, such as music, dance, needlework, and some basic literacy and religious instruction. The tutors and governesses who instructed Catherine were often chosen for their reliability and ability to manage a young girl's upbringing rather than for their intellectual prowess. These educators themselves sometimes came from the ranks of minor gentry or were appointed by the family's connections. Their attitudes, competence, and allegiances also affected the environment in which Catherine grew up, subtly influencing her worldview and the friendships she was allowed to nurture. The social and political positioning of Catherine's early companions reflected the complex hierarchies of Tudor England, where noble birth was paramount but proximity to power could also elevate lesser figures. Those girls and women who surrounded Catherine during her youth were often negotiating their own positions within this system, using friendships and household roles as means to secure favor and advancement. For some, their relationship to Catherine was a stepping stone to greater influence. For others, it was a precarious position that could quickly lead to disgrace if the political winds shifted. The intertwining of personal and political loyalties in these early friendships meant that Catherine's companions were not just playmates or caretakers but active participants in the subtle power dynamics of the time. The Howard family's ambition, combined with the volatile nature of Henry VIII's court, created an environment where trust was fragile and friendships could be as much about survival as affection. These dynamics foreshadowed the betrayals and heartbreaks that Catherine would experience later in life. Among Catherine's early companions were several young girls who would later gain their own notoriety or tragic fates, though the historical record often obscures their individual stories. The limited surviving correspondence and court documents reveal glimpses of these relationships, such as the close companionship between Catherine and Anne Bassett, who was both a friend and later a rival at court. Other girls served as attendants or ladies-in-waiting who formed part of Catherine's immediate household before her queenship, supporting her social functions and daily routines. The role of these companions extended beyond simple friendship. They were integral to the social education and political positioning of a young noblewoman. Through them, Catherine learned the delicate arts of courtly behavior, discretion, and alliance building. The influence of her companions also extended to the emotional sphere, providing support and companionship in an otherwise often lonely and precarious upbringing. It is important to recognize that the social environment of Catherine's youth was not only defined by the presence of friends and caretakers but also by the absence or loss of others. The volatile nature of Tudor politics meant that families could fall from grace rapidly, and many of Catherine's early companions would later be caught in the crossfire of court intrigues. Some would be banished, imprisoned, or executed, while others faded into obscurity. This transience shaped the way Catherine viewed loyalty and friendship, making the bonds of her early companions both precious and fragile. In addition, the household servants and attendants who surrounded Catherine played a vital though often overlooked role in her early social world. These women, often from lower social ranks, managed much of the day-to-day running of the household and provided practical and emotional support to the young girl. Their knowledge of court gossip, family affairs, and social expectations gave them a unique position of influence, even if unacknowledged in formal histories. Many of these attendants became lifelong allies or, conversely, potential threats, depending on shifting loyalties within the household. While historical sources rarely give detailed accounts of these female attendants, their presence is crucial to understanding the social fabric of Catherine's early years. The intimate daily interactions they shared with Catherine, including lessons in etiquette, religion, and personal comportment, were formative to her character. The attitudes and behaviors modeled by these companions were internalized by Catherine and later influenced how she conducted herself in the high-pressure environment of Henry VIII's court. Catherine's early friendships and associations also illustrate the intersection between gender, class, and power in Tudor England. Female companionship was often the only socially acceptable outlet for young noblewomen to form meaningful relationships outside the family. These relationships were tightly controlled by family heads and guardians, who were acutely aware of the political implications of who associated with whom. Therefore, Catherine's companions were often carefully selected or approved to ensure they aligned with the family's ambitions and political alliances. This controlled environment limited Catherine's ability to form spontaneous or independent friendships, instead situating her within a carefully managed network of relationships designed to protect and advance the Howard family's interests. At the same time, these early bonds provided Catherine with emotional support and a sense of belonging in a world that was often uncertain and dangerous. The story of Catherine Howard's early companions reveals a complex web of personal relationships embedded within the larger political and social structure of Tudor England. These companions were simultaneously friends, mentors, rivals, and political actors whose influence on Catherine's life was profound. Their stories, often overshadowed by Catherine's own dramatic rise and fall, offer valuable insights into the social dynamics of the Tudor court and the challenges faced by noblewomen navigating this treacherous world. In examining Catherine's early companions, it becomes clear that friendship and loyalty were not simply personal matters but deeply political acts. The alliances formed in childhood could determine fortunes in adulthood, and the presence or absence of a friend could mean the difference between survival and ruin at court. These companions, though largely lost to history, were essential players in the story of Catherine Howard's life and the turbulent world she inhabited. Catherine Howard's time as queen was brief but surrounded by a complex network of women who attended her closely, her ladies-in-waiting. These women were more than mere attendants. They played crucial roles in shaping her public image, influencing her behavior, and navigating the perilous social and political landscape of Henry VIII's court. The ladies-in-waiting to Catherine Howard were a mixture of seasoned courtiers, ambitious young noblewomen, and family allies, each bringing their own motivations and personalities to the Queen's inner circle. Among the most significant of Catherine's ladies-in-waiting was Jane Boleyn, Lady Rochford. Jane was a woman with a complicated reputation and a tangled personal history that made her one of the most controversial figures in Catherine's household. Married to George Boleyn and Boleyn's brother, Jane was thus connected to the previous queen and Boleyn, who had been executed less than 2 years before Catherine's ascension. This connection placed Jane in a delicate position at court. She was a lady of experience and status but also carried the weight of scandal associated with the Boleyn family's downfall. Jane Boleyn's personality was often described in historical accounts as manipulative and ambitious. She was known for her sharp intelligence and ability to navigate court intrigues, but also for being untrustworthy to some. During Catherine Howard's queenship, Jane served not only as a lady-in-waiting but also as a close confidant and companion. She was one of the women who accompanied Catherine during her imprisonment in the Tower of London after the Queen was accused of adultery. Jane's loyalty to Catherine was complex. Some sources suggest she may have betrayed the Queen by revealing private conversations that contributed to Catherine's downfall. Other interpretations argue that Jane was a victim of the same dangerous political games that claimed Catherine's life. Regardless, her role was pivotal as she was deeply enmeshed in the court's conspiracies and ultimately shared Catherine's tragic fate, being executed shortly after the Queen. Another prominent figure among Catherine's ladies-in-waiting was Anne Bassett. Unlike Jane Boleyn, Anne was younger and belonged to a family closely allied with the Howards. Anne's father, Sir John Bassett, was a prominent courtier, and her family connections made her a valuable companion for Catherine. Anne's relationship with the Queen was reportedly affectionate, and she was seen as a loyal friend during Catherine's short reign. However, Anne was also noted for her own political ambitions. Some historians speculate that she and other young noblewomen at court sought to use their proximity to the Queen to secure advantageous marriages or positions for themselves and their families. And Bassett's role at court extended beyond companionship. She was actively involved in court entertainments and ceremonies that highlighted Catherine's status. Her presence alongside the Queen during these public displays helped reinforce Catherine's image as youthful, charming, and well-supported by a circle of noble friends. Through women like Anne, Catherine projected an aura of vitality and grace that was important for maintaining favor with Henry VIII and the wider court. Margaret Douglas, though not always listed as one of Catherine's closest ladies-in-waiting, was another notable court lady connected to the Queen's household. As a member of the powerful Douglas family and a cousin of Henry VIII, Margaret's status brought prestige to any circle she joined. While her relationship with Catherine may have been more formal than intimate, her presence at court helped define the political landscape in which Catherine's ladies operated. Margaret's own experiences navigating court favor and political intrigue provide a useful comparison for understanding the risks and opportunities faced by Catherine's companions. The daily roles of these ladies-in-waiting were multifaceted and extended well beyond ceremonial duties. They attended Catherine at all times, helping her dress, managing her correspondence, and acting as intermediaries between the Queen and other courtiers. Their proximity to the Queen allowed them to influence decisions, offer advice, and shape Catherine's perceptions of those around her. The ladies-in-waiting were also responsible for maintaining the Queen's privacy and security, a particularly important task given the constant surveillance and gossip that characterized Tudor court life. Interactions among the ladies-in-waiting were marked by a mixture of camaraderie, rivalry, and strategic alliance. While they often presented a united front in public, behind-the-scenes competition for the Queen's favor and for political advancement was intense. Such rivalries could be subtle, played out through the management of social access and information, or more overt, involving court gossip and factional disputes. Catherine's ladies-in-waiting had to carefully balance their personal loyalties with the political realities of serving a queen whose position was precarious from the start. These women also played key roles in court ceremonies and entertainments, which were vital for projecting royal authority and magnificence. During Catherine's queenship, lavish events such as masques, banquets, and processions were staged, with her ladies prominently involved in organizing and participating. These occasions were opportunities for the ladies to display their loyalty and grace while also competing for the attention of the king and influential courtiers. Their performances at such events contributed significantly to Catherine's public image as a lively and fashionable queen, which was crucial for maintaining her standing in a court obsessed with appearances and favor. Private life at court, however, was often fraught with tension and danger. The ladies-in-waiting lived in close quarters with the queen, sharing her daily routines but also witnessing the pressures she faced. They were privy to her confidences, fears, and sometimes indiscretions. The degree to which they protected or exposed Catherine's secrets varied, affecting their own fates and reputations. Some ladies remained steadfastly loyal even after Catherine's downfall, while others distanced themselves or, like Jane Boleyn, became embroiled in the queen's scandal. The influence of Catherine's ladies-in-waiting on her image and court presence cannot be overstated. These women acted as extensions of the queen herself, shaping how she was perceived by the king and the court. Their fashion choices, behavior, and alliances reflected back on Catherine and could enhance or undermine her status. The loyalty and support of her ladies were essential for Catherine to navigate the complexities of court politics. Yet this reliance also made her vulnerable when some of these women turned against her or failed to protect her. The dynamics among the ladies-in-waiting were emblematic of the Tudor court's broader culture, where personal relationships were deeply intertwined with political ambitions and survival strategies. The network of women around Catherine was a microcosm of the alliances and rivalries that characterized the entire court. Their stories reveal how women at court were not just passive attendants but active participants in the power struggles of the era, using friendship, influence, and sometimes betrayal to advance their positions. The ladies-in-waiting to Queen Catherine Howard were complex figures whose roles went far beyond serving as companions or attendants. Jane Boleyn, Lady Rochford, embodied the dangerous intersections of loyalty and betrayal, and Bassett represented youthful ambition and familial alliance. Margaret Douglas illustrated the wider aristocratic networks influencing court life. Together, these women shaped Catherine's public image, supported her daily life, and engaged in the intricate social politics that ultimately contributed to both her rise and tragic fall. Their stories add crucial depth to the understanding of Catherine Howard's reign and illuminate the vital, often overlooked role of women in Tudor power dynamics. Among the men most intimately linked to Catherine Howard, two figures stand out prominently: Thomas Culpeper and Francis Dereham. Their relationships with Catherine were pivotal not only in shaping her personal life but also in sealing her tragic fate as Queen of England. Beyond them, a range of other male courtiers, guards, and attendants played essential, if less notorious, roles in Catherine's circle, influencing her fortunes through their loyalties, ambitions, and political alliances. Thomas Culpeper was a young and favored courtier during the reign of Henry VIII, holding the position of Gentleman of the Privy Chamber. His status granted him close and frequent access to the king's person and, by extension, to the queen. Culpeper's background was that of a member of the English gentry, with ties to influential families, which helped him secure his place at court. Known for his charm and good looks, he became a trusted member of Henry's inner circle, which positioned him to be one of the most important men in Catherine Howard's life once she became queen. Culpeper's relationship with Catherine was both intimate and clandestine. Historical accounts suggest that they developed a close personal relationship, with Culpeper visiting the queen privately on multiple occasions, even after she had married Henry VIII. These secret meetings and exchanges of letters became central to the scandal that ultimately engulfed Catherine. The nature of their relationship, whether purely emotional, physical, or a combination, remains a subject of debate among historians. However, what is clear is that the discovery of this liaison was seen as a grave betrayal by Henry and his court, providing the grounds for Catherine's arrest and trial. The scandal surrounding Thomas Culpeper was deeply intertwined with the political intrigues and personal paranoia of Henry VIII's reign. Culpeper's position as a close servant of the king made his relationship with the queen particularly dangerous, as it represented a breach of royal trust and threatened the legitimacy of the Tudor succession. When evidence of their affair came to light, Culpeper was arrested, imprisoned, and eventually executed alongside Catherine's other alleged lover, Francis Dereham. Culpeper's downfall was swift, and his involvement in the scandal irrevocably tarnished Catherine's reputation and led directly to her execution. Francis Dereham was another male figure whose connection to Catherine was both significant and damaging. Unlike Culpeper, whose relationship with Catherine developed after she became queen, Dereham's history with her dated back to her youth. Before Catherine's rise to the throne, Dereham had been her secretary and was reputed to have had a romantic relationship with her during her teenage years. This relationship, occurring before Catherine's marriage to Henry VIII, was viewed as problematic, especially once Catherine became queen, as it raised questions about her virginity and suitability as a royal consort. Dereham's attempts to maintain influence over Catherine after her marriage to Henry were fraught with danger. Historical records suggest that Dereham sought to continue his association with Catherine, possibly hoping to regain her favor or leverage their past connection for personal advancement. He reportedly sent letters and messages to the Queen, which were intercepted and used as evidence against both of them. Dereham's persistence and his involvement in secret communications with the Queen contributed significantly to the charges of adultery and treason brought against Catherine. The relationship between Dereham and Catherine was a critical factor in the court's perception of her character and morality. His involvement suggested a pattern of indiscretion and disloyalty that undermined the Queen's standing. Dereham was arrested and imprisoned alongside Culpeper, and his testimony and the evidence he provided were instrumental in the prosecution of Catherine. Like Culpeper, Dereham was executed for his role in the scandal, his fate emblematic of the ruthless justice meted out in Henry's court. Beyond Culpeper and Dereham, Catherine's life at court was influenced by other male courtiers and guards who acted either as confidantes, protectors, or adversaries. These men occupied various roles within the royal household and had varying degrees of influence over the Queen's daily life and security. Some were loyal servants who endeavored to shield Catherine from harm, while others were opportunists or spies seeking to advance their own interests by aligning with or betraying her. Among the courtiers, a complex web of alliances and enmities developed, shaped by the shifting political landscape of Henry VIII's reign. These men's loyalties were often conditional, influenced by their ambitions, personal relationships, and the prevailing power structures. For Catherine, this meant that trust was a scarce and valuable commodity. The actions of her male attendants could mean the difference between favor and ruin. Some may have encouraged her to maintain discretion and caution, while others may have facilitated or exploited her vulnerabilities for their gain. The male servants and attendants who worked closely with Catherine in the royal household also played crucial roles, though often overlooked in historical narratives. These men were responsible for the Queen's personal security, managing access to her chambers, and overseeing the logistics of her daily life. Their loyalty was essential in controlling who could see the Queen and under what circumstances, making them key players in the unfolding of the scandal that engulfed Catherine. The roles these men played in Catherine's life were deeply intertwined with the political alliances they maintained. The Howard family's ambitions and the factional rivalries at court meant that many of these men had competing interests that influenced their behavior toward the Queen. Some sought to protect her as a member of the powerful Howard household, while others acted in the interest of rival factions seeking to diminish the Howards' influence. These conflicting loyalties added layers of complexity to Catherine's relationships with the men around her and heightened the risks she faced. The political alliances tied to Thomas Culpeper, Francis Dereham, and other male figures connected to Catherine were central to the Queen's fortunes. Culpeper's close association with the king and his position within Henry's trusted circle gave him considerable influence, but also made him vulnerable to accusations of betrayal. Dereham's past relationship with Catherine placed both of them under suspicion, especially in a court atmosphere increasingly intolerant of any hint of impropriety from the Queen. The downfall of Catherine Howard was not simply the result of personal failings but also the product of the intricate and often ruthless political machinations in which these men played their part. The men around Catherine were both her protectors and her undoers, reflecting the precarious position of a queen whose survival depended on navigating the dangerous intersection of personal relationships and political power. The male figures closely connected to Catherine Howard, most notably Thomas Culpeper and Francis Dereham, were integral to the dramatic trajectory of her life at court. Their biographies reveal the interplay of personal desire, ambition, and political intrigue that characterized Tudor England. Their relationships with Catherine, both before and during her queenship, became the catalyst for the scandal that ended her life. The broader network of male courtiers, guards, and servants further shaped Catherine's experience, highlighting the complexities of loyalty and betrayal that defined her brief reign. Understanding these men and their roles offers vital insight into the dynamics that ultimately led to Catherine Howard's tragic downfall. Throughout Catherine Howard's brief and tumultuous tenure as Queen of England, much of the public attention and historical focus has been on her relationships with powerful figures. Her royal husband Henry VIII, her ladies-in-waiting, and the men implicated in her scandal. Yet beneath these more visible connections lay a network of secret and intimate friendships, composed of lesser-known women who played crucial but quiet roles in supporting Catherine during her rise and fall. These women, often overshadowed by more prominent figures, provided companionship, counsel, and emotional refuge in an environment rife with suspicion and political maneuvering. Understanding these intimate friendships opens a window into the private life of a queen navigating one of the most dangerous courts in history, revealing the delicate balance of trust and betrayal that shaped her fate. Many of the women who formed Catherine's hidden circle were gentlewomen or attendants who, though not officially designated as ladies-in-waiting, accompanied her closely in less conspicuous ways. These companions often came from families allied with the Howards or were trusted attendants who had long served the household before Catherine's ascent. Their identities are sometimes difficult to pinpoint due to the scarcity of records and the necessity for discretion in their roles. Unlike the more prominent ladies who moved in the spotlight of court ceremonies, these quieter confidantes operated behind the scenes, offering emotional support and practical help in moments when Catherine faced the relentless pressures of court life. During Catherine's rapid rise to the position of queen, these secret companions were invaluable. As Catherine transitioned from a relatively obscure noblewoman to the wife of one of Europe's most powerful monarchs, she was thrust into a world filled with intrigue, competition, and constant surveillance. The emotional toll of such a transformation cannot be overstated, especially for a young woman who had experienced instability in her earlier years. These trusted friends provided a semblance of normalcy and comfort, offering a listening ear and companionship away from the ever-watchful eyes of the court. Female companionship in this context went far beyond casual friendship. These women served as confidants to whom Catherine could reveal her hopes, fears, and secrets, matters she could not share with anyone else, particularly men who might betray her. The court was a labyrinth of alliances and rivalries, where information was power and gossip could be deadly. Having a small, reliable group of women who understood the stakes and remained loyal was essential for Catherine's emotional survival. In navigating court intrigues, these intimate friends often played subtle but crucial roles. They helped Catherine interpret the shifting political winds, advised her on whom to trust, and sometimes intervened discreetly on her behalf. Their support could involve warning her of dangers, mediating disputes, or simply providing reassurance in moments of uncertainty. Because the queen was isolated by her unique position, the counsel of these female confidants was among the few reliable sources of guidance and solace she could access. The private nature of these relationships meant that many interactions between Catherine and her closest friends were conducted in secrecy. Historical records and surviving documents, including letters and gifts, hint at the depth and complexity of these bonds. Letters exchanged between Catherine and her confidants reveal coded language, affectionate expressions, and veiled references to the challenges they faced together. Such correspondence was often carefully concealed to avoid attracting unwanted attention or suspicion from court spies and rivals. Gifts exchanged among these women carried symbolic meaning, serving as tokens of loyalty and solidarity. Jewelry, embroidered handkerchiefs, and other personal items were commonly given as signs of friendship and support. These exchanges not only strengthened personal bonds but also functioned as discreet affirmations of alliance within a hostile environment. For Catherine, these small gestures were vital reminders that she was not alone amid the treacherous world she inhabited. Secret meetings between Catherine and her closest female companions were equally significant. These gatherings, often held in private chambers or secluded parts of the palace, allowed the queen and her friends to speak freely and offer mutual comfort. In such moments, Catherine could temporarily shed the burdens of royal protocol and connect with those who shared her vulnerabilities. The risks involved in these meetings were high. Discovery could lead to accusations of conspiracy or disloyalty, but the emotional necessity outweighed the danger. The dynamics of trust within these intimate circles were complex and fraught with tension. Trust was a precious commodity at court, and the consequences of misplaced confidence could be severe. Catherine's reliance on her female friends required a careful assessment of their loyalty and discretion. While many women in her inner circle remained steadfast and protective, the atmosphere of fear and intrigue made betrayals almost inevitable in some cases. Indeed, instances of betrayal were a tragic aspect of Catherine's intimate friendships. Some confidantes, whether motivated by self-preservation, coercion, or ambition, revealed secrets that contributed to the queen's undoing. The same networks of support that offered comfort could become conduits for dangerous information when trust was broken. The queen's vulnerability in this regard underscores the precariousness of female solidarity within the rigid hierarchies and surveillance of Tudor court life. At the heart of this web of secret friendships was the constant tension between genuine loyalty and the corrosive influence of fear. The women who stood by Catherine did so at great personal risk, fully aware that their association with a queen accused of adultery and treason could lead to their own downfall. Yet the emotional bonds forged in these secret circles were profound, reflecting the human need for connection and understanding amid adversity. The story of Catherine Howard's lesser-known female companions challenges simplistic portrayals of Tudor court life as solely a realm of ruthless power struggles. It reveals the nuanced ways in which women created spaces of intimacy and support within an oppressive system. These relationships were not only personal but political, shaping how Catherine experienced her queenship and how she coped with the isolation and danger it entailed. In examining these secret friendships, one gains a richer understanding of Catherine Howard not just as a tragic figure of scandal but as a woman surrounded by others who sought to protect and sustain her in difficult times. The emotional landscape of her life was shaped as much by these quiet alliances as by the grand public dramas recorded by historians. Their stories, often hidden in the shadows of more famous events, offer essential insights into the private dimensions of power, loyalty, and survival in Tudor England. Catherine Howard's secret and intimate friendships comprised a vital but often overlooked aspect of her life as queen. These lesser-known women provided critical emotional support and guidance during her meteoric rise and devastating fall. Through letters, gifts, and clandestine meetings, they forged bonds that helped Catherine navigate the perilous intrigues of court. Yet, within these circles, trust was fragile, and betrayal was a constant threat. The delicate interplay of loyalty and suspicion in these private relationships reveals the human complexity behind the historical narrative of Catherine Howard's reign, highlighting the profound impact of female companionship in an era dominated by political intrigue and personal peril. The life of Catherine Howard, the fifth wife of King Henry VIII, was profoundly shaped not only by her own immediate family but also by the extended network of relatives, cousins, siblings, and their friends within the powerful Howard family. This network was complex and far-reaching, comprising individuals whose influence ranged from intimate personal companions to political allies and, in some cases, dangerous adversaries. Understanding how these family companions operated around Catherine is essential to grasping the nuances of her rise to queenship and the tragic collapse that followed. At the heart of Catherine's familial support structure was the Howard family itself, one of the most prominent noble houses in Tudor England. The Howards were known for their extensive connections across the court and throughout the country, and their influence in political and social spheres was substantial. Within this web, cousins, siblings, and their associates formed a powerful network that could both protect and threaten Catherine's interests. Catherine's immediate family circle was marked by the involvement of several cousins and siblings, many of whom were active participants in court life. These relatives often served as companions, advisors, or intermediaries for Catherine, helping her navigate the dangerous waters of royal favor and factional rivalry. Their presence was a double-edged sword. While some family members offered unwavering loyalty and support, others were motivated by ambition or political rivalry, occasionally acting against Catherine's interests or contributing to the tensions that surrounded her. The friendships cultivated by these family members further extended Catherine's circle of influence but also complicated it. Friends of Catherine's cousins or siblings often became informal allies or enemies by association. In the competitive atmosphere of the Tudor court, even distant connections could have significant consequences. Friends who supported Catherine and the Howard cause helped consolidate her position and offered networks of information and protection. Conversely, those aligned with rival factions posed threats that could undermine her security and amplify court intrigues. Central to the orchestration of this familial network was Thomas Howard, Duke of Norfolk, Catherine's powerful uncle. As one of the most influential noblemen in England, Norfolk's role was pivotal in shaping the fortunes of the Howard family and, by extension, Catherine herself. His status as a seasoned statesman and military leader gave him the authority to maneuver political alliances and protect his family's interests at court. Norfolk's influence extended beyond formal political machinations. He was also deeply involved in managing the personal and social connections that comprised the Howard network. His ability to marshal resources and loyalty among family members and retainers was crucial in supporting Catherine's elevation to the throne. However, Norfolk's position also meant that he had to balance competing interests within the family and court, which sometimes resulted in conflicting pressures on Catherine. The Duke of Norfolk's guidance and intervention were vital in navigating the dangers posed by rival factions at court, particularly during the volatile years of Henry VIII's later reign. Norfolk's efforts to protect Catherine were constrained by the king's volatile temperament and the escalating suspicions that eventually led to the queen's downfall. Despite his power, Norfolk could not shield Catherine from the consequences of the scandal that engulfed her, though his network of family companions played important roles in managing the crisis. Another crucial component of Catherine's familial support system was the network of family retainers. These men and women served the Howards in various capacities, from managing estates and finances to acting as messengers and attendants within the royal household. Retainers were often deeply loyal to their noble patrons, and their stories provide valuable insight into the daily operations of the Howard family and the social dynamics that influenced Catherine's life. Retainers acted as intermediaries between the family and the broader court environment, facilitating communication and sometimes participating in political intrigue on behalf of their employers. Their loyalty was instrumental in sustaining the Howard family's influence and in supporting Catherine's position as queen. However, retainers were also vulnerable to shifting political winds, and their fortunes could rise or fall along with those of their patrons. The relationship between Catherine and her retainers was complex and varied. Some retainers were close enough to the queen to be entrusted with sensitive tasks or personal messages, reflecting a degree of intimacy and trust. Others maintained more distant roles, serving primarily as functionaries within the Howard household. The stories of these retainers illustrate the diverse ways in which family companions contributed to the network that surrounded Catherine, from everyday service to involvement in the dramatic events that led to her tragic end. The dynamics within the Howard family network were marked by both solidarity and rivalry. While the family's overall goal was to secure and enhance their collective power, individual ambitions and disagreements often led to internal conflicts. These tensions sometimes played out through the actions of family companions, who might align themselves with different factions or pursue personal interests at odds with Catherine's well-being. This internal complexity was further complicated by the broader political environment of the Tudor court, where alliances shifted rapidly and suspicion was rampant. The Howard family's prominence made them targets for rival noble houses and court factions, intensifying the challenges Catherine faced as queen. Family companions were caught in this maelstrom, forced to navigate loyalties to kin alongside the practical realities of court politics. The role of cousins and siblings in Catherine's life was multifaceted. Some, like her cousin Lady Jane Howard, provided direct companionship and support, attending court alongside her and sharing in the social and ceremonial aspects of queenship. Others engaged in political maneuvering on Catherine's behalf, advocating for her interests with the king and other courtiers. These efforts helped maintain Catherine's favor during her brief reign but also exposed her to greater scrutiny and suspicion from enemies. Moreover, the friends of Catherine's family members could act as conduits for information and influence. These secondary connections expanded Catherine's social reach, creating informal alliances that could be mobilized in times of need. At the same time, such networks increased the risk of leaks and betrayal, as more individuals became privy to sensitive information about the Queen's private life and vulnerabilities. The complex interplay between family loyalty and political necessity was epitomized in the figure of Thomas Howard, Duke of Norfolk. His attempt to manage the competing demands of protecting his niece, advancing the family's political agenda, and navigating the volatile royal court placed him at the center of many of the critical decisions affecting Catherine's fate. Norfolk's patronage and network enabled Catherine's ascent but could not ultimately prevent her fall, illustrating the limitations of even the most powerful family connections in Tudor England. In addition to Norfolk, other prominent Howard relatives and their friends influenced Catherine's fortunes. These included influential brothers, uncles and cousins who held key positions in the court and military, lending support to the family's interests. Their networks of retainers and clients formed an extended web of power that Catherine could rely on, at least temporarily, during her queenship. The stories of family retainers add another dimension to this network. These individuals often operated at the margins of historical records but played essential roles in the daily functioning of the Howard household. Some retainers were involved in discreet communications or tasks that had political implications, such as delivering messages, managing sensitive affairs, or gathering intelligence. Their loyalty to the family, and by extension to Catherine, was a vital component of the support system that surrounded the Queen. However, the precariousness of the Howard family's position meant that retainers, like their noble patrons, could quickly find themselves in jeopardy. The scandal that engulfed Catherine led to investigations and purges that affected not only the queen but also those connected to her by blood or service. Retainers caught in the fallout faced imprisonment, loss of status, or worse, underscoring the risks inherent in serving a royal figure embroiled in controversy. The role of family companions in Catherine Howard's life was central to both her rise and her tragic downfall. The Howard family's extensive network of cousins, siblings, friends, and retainers created a support system that helped Catherine navigate the perilous environment of the Tudor court. The influence of her uncle, Thomas Howard, Duke of Norfolk, was especially significant in shaping these networks and attempting to shield Catherine from danger. Yet, the very complexity and reach of these family connections also brought risks, as internal rivalries and external political pressures made loyalty fragile. The stories of these family companions provide critical insight into the social and political dynamics that defined Catherine Howard's experience as queen, illustrating the intricate interplay of kinship, power, and survival in one of England's most turbulent royal courts. The Tudor court was an environment unlike any other in 16th-century England, a complex, highly charged atmosphere where politics, power, and personal survival intersected with relentless intensity. For those close to Catherine Howard, Queen of England, the pressures and dangers inherent in court life were particularly acute. Her companions, whether ladies-in-waiting, family retainers, or secret confidantes, found themselves enmeshed in a world where loyalties could be both life-saving and perilous, where ambition could quickly turn to ruin, and where fear was a constant undercurrent. The impact of this harsh environment on Catherine's friends shaped not only their actions during her reign but also their fates in the wake of her arrest and execution. From the moment Catherine ascended to the throne, her companions were thrust into a sphere governed by scrutiny and suspicion. The court was a place of performance where appearances mattered deeply, but beneath the surface lurked a web of rivalries, alliances, and espionage. For those closest to the queen, the stakes were especially high. Their fortunes and reputations were linked to hers, meaning that Catherine's successes elevated them, while her failures could devastate their social standing and even their lives. The pressures to remain loyal, discreet, and politically savvy were immense. The dangers faced by Catherine's companions were not abstract threats but lived realities. The Tudor court was notoriously unforgiving, particularly for women who were judged not only by their political allegiances but also by their personal morality. As the queen's reputation came under attack, initially due to whispers of her youth and behavior, and later the full-blown scandal involving allegations of adultery, those connected to her found themselves vulnerable to accusations, surveillance, and political retribution. The peril was not limited to public disgrace. The Tudor justice system was brutal, and accusations of disloyalty or treason could lead to imprisonment, torture, or execution. Within this fraught environment, stories of loyalty emerge as some of the most poignant. Certain companions stood by Catherine steadfastly, demonstrating remarkable courage and commitment despite the risks. These women and men often acted as emotional anchors for the queen, offering solace in private moments and attempting to shield her from the harsh realities of court politics. Their loyalty was not only personal but also strategic. By supporting Catherine, they aligned themselves with a powerful faction that promised influence and protection. However, loyalty was a fragile commodity. The same pressures that inspired devotion could also provoke betrayal. Some companions, perhaps driven by fear or ambition, chose self-preservation over allegiance. Betrayal took many forms, leaking information to rival courtiers, withdrawing support at critical moments, or actively conspiring against the queen. Such actions were frequently motivated by the unpredictable shifts in power within the court, where individuals sought to align themselves with the prevailing faction to safeguard their own positions. Ambition was another powerful force shaping the behavior of Catherine's companions. For many, proximity to the queen was an opportunity to advance their social status and secure political favor. This ambition sometimes inspired genuine support for Catherine's reign, but it also fostered competition and suspicion within her inner circle. The pursuit of influence could lead companions to undermine one another or to exploit Catherine's vulnerabilities for personal gain. Ambition thus added a volatile dimension to relationships that might otherwise have been based purely on affection or loyalty. Fear was perhaps the most pervasive emotion experienced by Catherine's friends. The constant threat of surveillance, arrest, and punishment created an atmosphere of paranoia. Companions had to weigh every word and action carefully, aware that a misstep could have dire consequences. Fear influenced their decisions, whether to speak out, to intervene on Catherine's behalf, or to distance themselves when the queen's situation worsened. This fear sometimes fractured the bonds of friendship, as individuals struggled to balance self-interest with the risks of association. The changing fortunes of Catherine Howard dramatically affected her companions. At the height of her favor, her friends enjoyed the benefits of royal patronage, access to the king's court, gifts and social prestige. They participated in courtly ceremonies, entertained alongside the queen, and benefited from the glow of her ascendancy. This period was marked by optimism and the hope that Catherine's queenship would secure lasting influence for the Howard family and their allies. Yet this period of favor was short-lived. As rumors about Catherine's past and conduct began to circulate, her companions faced mounting uncertainty. The initial disbelief and defense of the queen gave way to growing concern as investigations into her behavior unfolded. Some companions remained loyal, attempting to mitigate the damage or to advocate for clemency, while others began to distance themselves or to prepare for the fallout. The transition from royal favor to scandal was traumatic, forcing many to confront the precariousness of their positions and the possibility of disgrace. The arrest of Catherine Howard marked a turning point with profound repercussions for her friends. The Queen's imprisonment and subsequent execution sent shockwaves through her circle, shattering relationships and destabilizing alliances. Companions who had once celebrated her rise now faced the grim reality of her downfall, forced to reckon with their complicity or innocence in the eyes of the crown. Some were arrested or interrogated, others lost their positions and privileges, and many endured lasting damage to their reputations. Emotionally, the impact was devastating. For those who had formed genuine bonds with Catherine, her arrest was a source of grief and anxiety. They witnessed the dismantling of not only a queen but also a friend, experiencing profound loss amid the cold calculations of court politics. The fear of association with a disgraced queen permeated their lives, leading to isolation and the erosion of social networks. The emotional toll was compounded by the public nature of Catherine's downfall, which transformed personal tragedy into a spectacle of royal justice. Social consequences for Catherine's companions were equally severe. The stigma of association with a condemned queen affected their standing at court and in society. Many found themselves marginalized or excluded from influential circles, their careers stalled or ended by the taint of scandal. Some were able to recover through careful navigation of the political landscape or by forging new alliances, but for others the damage was irreparable. The court's ruthless nature ensured that few could remain unscathed by the fallout. Despite these challenges, some companions demonstrated resilience. They adapted to the shifting political climate, aligning themselves with new patrons or withdrawing from public life to preserve what remained of their status. Their stories illustrate the broader experience of courtiers in Tudor England, caught between the demands of loyalty and the necessities of survival in an environment where fortunes could change overnight. The experiences of Catherine Howard's friends also highlight the gendered nature of court pressures. Women, in particular, were vulnerable to moral scrutiny and political manipulation. Their fates were often tied to the reputations of the men and women they served or befriended, making the risks of association with a queen accused of sexual misconduct especially perilous. This dynamic intensified the emotional burden carried by female companions, who navigated a world where personal relationships could become grounds for accusation and punishment. Moreover, the complex interplay of loyalty, betrayal, ambition, and fear among Catherine's companions offers insights into the broader social fabric of the Tudor court. It reveals how personal relationships were enmeshed with political calculations, and how individuals negotiated their identities and allegiances within a system defined by hierarchy, patronage, and surveillance. The stories of Catherine's friends embody the contradictions of court life: friendship intertwined with suspicion, support shadowed by self-interest, and hope undermined by danger. The impact of court life on Catherine Howard's companions was profound and multifaceted. The pressures and dangers they faced shaped their actions and decisions, influencing the course of Catherine's queenship and its tragic end. Stories of loyalty and betrayal, ambition and fear, illuminate the human dimensions of their experiences amid the grandeur and peril of Tudor England. The emotional and social consequences of Catherine's arrest and execution reverberated through her circle, underscoring the fragile nature of friendship and power in one of history's most infamous courts. Through their lives, we gain a richer understanding of the personal costs behind the public drama of Catherine Howard's story. The execution of Catherine Howard in 1542 marked not only the tragic end of a young queen but also a profound turning point for those closest to her. The aftermath for Catherine's companions was a landscape of peril, uncertainty, and for some ruin. The scandal that engulfed the queen rippled through her intimate circle, reshaping lives and destinies in ways that would resonate far beyond the immediate tragedy. Understanding what became of these men and women offers valuable insight into the brutal realities of Tudor court life and the fragile nature of favor and friendship under Henry VIII's reign. Among the most notable figures implicated in the downfall of Catherine Howard was Jane Boleyn, Lady Rochford. Jane's fate was emblematic of the harsh justice meted out to those linked to the Queen's scandal. A member of the royal household and a former lady-in-waiting to both Boleyn and Catherine Howard, Jane occupied a precarious position. Her closeness to the Queen and her role as a confidant ultimately made her vulnerable when accusations of adultery and treason surfaced against Catherine. Jane was charged with facilitating secret meetings between Catherine and her former lovers, allegations that sealed her tragic end. In 1542, the same year as Catherine's execution, Jane herself was condemned and executed, highlighting the severe consequences for women caught in the maelstrom of court intrigue. Her death was a stark reminder of the dangers faced by those whose loyalty to a fallen queen could be construed as complicity in treason. Other women associated with Catherine Howard's household and court life faced varied fates after the Queen's death. The ladies-in-waiting, whose roles had centered on companionship, service, and sometimes political maneuvering, were suddenly thrust into an uncertain future. Some were immediately removed from their positions, their careers at court effectively ended by the taint of association. Others managed to retain some degree of favor, either by distancing themselves from the scandal or by demonstrating unwavering loyalty to the crown. Their survival depended on a delicate balance of discretion, adaptability, and sometimes sheer luck. For many survivors, the primary strategy to maintain status or escape disgrace involved carefully navigating the treacherous political landscape that followed Catherine's execution. These women had to negotiate their identities anew, either by finding patronage under new queens or noble families or by retreating from public life altogether. Marriage was often a key avenue for rehabilitation, as alliances forged through matrimony could offer protection and social stability. Some ladies-in-waiting married into lesser nobility or gentry families, effectively removing themselves from the dangerous glare of court politics. Others sought to re-enter the royal household in different capacities, hoping to rebuild trust with the king and his advisors. The process of rehabilitation was neither straightforward nor guaranteed. The shadow of Catherine's downfall lingered, and suspicion could persist for years. Women who had once been close to the Queen often had to prove their loyalty to the new regime repeatedly, navigating a court environment that remained vigilant against any hint of dissent or scandal. Their social survival demanded not only political acumen but also an ability to adapt to rapidly shifting power dynamics, demonstrating loyalty to Henry VIII's subsequent wives or the factions that gained ascendancy at court. Male companions of Catherine Howard, including courtiers and servants who had been involved in or connected to the Queen's private life, faced a range of punishments and in some cases, eventual rehabilitation. The most infamous among them was Thomas Culpeper, a gentleman of the King's Privy Chamber, who was executed for his illicit relationship with Catherine. Culpeper's fate was a stark warning to male courtiers about the dangers of overstepping boundaries with the Queen. His execution underscored the ruthless measures Henry VIII was willing to employ to maintain his authority and punish those who threatened the sanctity of the monarchy. Francis Derham, another male figure closely connected to Catherine's past, also met a grim fate. Though his relationship with Catherine predated her queenship, his involvement in the scandal implicated him in charges of treason. Derham was executed, his downfall illustrating the limited mercy extended to men associated with the Queen's personal history. These high-profile punishments served both as retribution and as political theater, reinforcing the king's control and deterring others from similar transgressions. Other male courtiers and attendants who were less directly involved but still associated with Catherine's circle experienced a range of outcomes. Some faced imprisonment or temporary disgrace, only to be gradually restored to favor through the intercession of powerful patrons or by demonstrating renewed loyalty. Others chose or were forced into exile from court life, retreating to their estates or seeking positions away from the volatile center of power. The variable nature of these outcomes reflected the complex interplay of personal loyalty, political expediency, and shifting alliances that characterized Tudor court life. The social and political consequences for families tied to Catherine Howard's circle were significant and far-reaching. The Howard family, despite its prominence and power, could not escape the stain of scandal that Catherine's downfall brought. Although Thomas Howard, Duke of Norfolk, worked tirelessly to protect the family's interests, the episode weakened their standing and opened opportunities for rival factions to advance. The fallout from Catherine's execution diminished the Howards' influence temporarily, forcing them to engage in careful political maneuvering to recover their position. Other noble and gentry families connected through marriage or patronage to Catherine's circle also faced scrutiny and challenges. The scandal disrupted established alliances and created an atmosphere of mistrust, making it difficult for these families to maintain or expand their influence. Some families suffered losses in court appointments or royal favor, while others were able to capitalize on the changing political landscape to distance themselves from the taint and even gain advantage. This period of upheaval underscored the precariousness of noble power in Tudor England, where fortunes could change rapidly based on royal favor or scandal. In the broader context, Catherine Howard's downfall and its aftermath exemplify the intense pressures faced by those who surrounded Henry VIII's queens. Companions, whether women or men, family or servants, were vulnerable to the consequences of their association with a royal figure whose personal life was subject to intense scrutiny and political manipulation. Their experiences reflect the human cost of life at court, where proximity to power offered opportunity but also peril. For many of Catherine's companions, survival meant navigating a complex web of social expectations, political dangers and personal loyalties. The delicate balance between public allegiance and private relationships was a constant challenge, requiring strategic thinking and often painful compromises. Those who succeeded in maintaining or restoring their status did so through a combination of caution, adaptability, and sometimes the goodwill of new patrons. Those who failed faced social ostracism, loss of property or position, and, in some cases, death. The stories of these companions after Catherine's death also shed light on the broader mechanisms of Tudor court life. They illustrate how scandal could be used as a political tool, how networks of patronage operated, and how individuals attempted to exert agency within a highly controlled and often ruthless environment. They reveal the ways in which personal relationships intersected with power and politics, shaping not only individual lives but also the fortunes of families and factions. In reflecting on the aftermath of Catherine Howard's queenship, it becomes clear that her companions' fates were as much a part of her story as her own. Their lives after her execution demonstrate the enduring impact of royal favor and disgrace, the resilience required to survive in the Tudor court, and the intricate social dynamics that defined one of England's most turbulent eras. Through their experiences, we gain a deeper understanding of the costs and complexities of life at the heart of Tudor power. Catherine Howard's brief and turbulent tenure as Queen of England is often told through the lives of prominent figures, royalty, high-ranking courtiers, and well-documented ladies-in-waiting. However, behind the dramatic headlines and famous names, there existed a multitude of lesser-known individuals whose presence was no less essential to the functioning of the royal household and the unfolding of events. These were the servants, attendants, minor courtiers, and other obscure figures who lived and worked in the shadow of the Queen's glittering court. Their lives, often unrecorded or barely mentioned in official documents, are crucial for understanding the daily reality of Catherine's world, the social dynamics of Tudor court life, and the subtle ways in which influence and loyalty played out beyond the spotlight. The first challenge in discussing these unrecorded or obscure companions is the scarcity of records. Unlike the dukes, duchesses, and high-ranking ladies who left behind letters, chronicled speeches, and official correspondence, many of these minor figures remain elusive in historical archives. Often, their names appear only fleetingly in household accounts, payment records, or the occasional letter, leaving historians with mere fragments from which to reconstruct their lives and roles. For some, not even a full name is known. Only a role or title such as maid of the chamber, footman, or valet appears, making it difficult to identify individuals or trace their biographies. Despite these limitations, careful archival work can shed light on the lives of these invisible companions. Household expense books, lists of appointments, court financial records, and legal documents sometimes provide clues, entries recording wages paid, garments ordered, or disciplinary actions taken. Such records reveal who served in the Queen's personal retinue, the size and composition of her household, and changes in personnel over time. Cross-referencing these entries with court events, letters, and diaries from the period can offer a richer, if still partial, picture of the individuals behind the titles. Understanding the roles these minor figures played is essential for grasping how Tudor court life functioned on a practical level. The Queen's household was a microcosm of service and ceremony, requiring a complex hierarchy of attendants to maintain appearances, ensure comfort, and uphold the strict protocols of court. These servants and attendants were responsible for a wide array of tasks: dressing the Queen, managing her wardrobe, arranging her chambers, attending her during meals and outings, and facilitating communication within and beyond the court. Their proximity to the queen and her inner circle, while often unnoticed by outsiders, meant that they were privy to intimate details of court life and could exert subtle influence through their actions and relationships. A lady's maid responsible for Catherine's garments would have not only managed her wardrobe but also shaped the queen's public image through choices of dress and presentation. This role, seemingly mundane, carried significant weight at a court where fashion was a language of power and status. Similarly, trusted valets or pages might serve as messengers or intermediaries, conveying private messages or facilitating secret meetings. In this way, the minor figures in Catherine's household could become conduits of information and influence, sometimes playing roles in the intrigues that surrounded the queen. The social position of these servants and attendants was complex. While they were clearly subordinate to the nobility and gentry around them, some held relatively stable and prestigious positions within the household, especially if they served in the queen's personal chambers. Such positions offered access to the royal family and the possibility of upward mobility through patronage or marriage. However, the court was also a precarious place for servants, where a misstep or falling out of favor could lead to dismissal, poverty, or worse. Their survival often depended on a delicate balance of discretion, loyalty, and the ability to navigate shifting alliances. One of the intriguing aspects of studying these obscure companions is the possibility that they influenced events in ways that were never fully recorded or understood by contemporaries. For example, a servant overhearing private conversations or witnessing secret exchanges might have acted as an informant, either to protect their own interests or to curry favor with more powerful courtiers. Alternatively, they might have facilitated clandestine communications between the queen and her allies or lovers, roles that carried significant risk but also the potential for reward. The degree to which these minor figures were active participants in court intrigue remains largely speculative but cannot be dismissed. The significance of these invisible companions extends beyond their practical roles. They represent the human texture of court life, revealing the networks of service, loyalty, and survival that underpin the grand historical narratives. Their presence challenges the tendency to focus solely on the great figures and instead invites us to consider how power and influence operated through social relationships at all levels. They remind us that history is not only shaped by kings and queens but also by those who supported, enabled, or even resisted them behind the scenes. Moreover, examining these obscure companions contributes to a more inclusive and nuanced understanding of Tudor society. It highlights the experiences of women and men who lived and worked in proximity to power but whose voices were largely silenced or overlooked in historical records. This perspective broadens the scope of historical inquiry, allowing us to appreciate the complexity of court life and the diverse individuals who made it possible. Some efforts to piece together the lives of Catherine Howard's lesser-known companions have involved examining indirect evidence such as legal disputes, wills, and mentions in third-party correspondence. For example, servants who were dismissed or implicated in minor scandals sometimes appear in court records or petitions for reinstatement. These documents can reveal personal details such as family origins, relationships with other members of the household, or economic circumstances, providing valuable context for their experiences. Additionally, the physical spaces these companions inhabited, the queen's chambers, kitchens, stables, and servants' quarters, offer insights into their daily lives and social hierarchies. Archaeological studies and architectural analyses of Tudor palaces and manors help reconstruct the environments in which these individuals worked and lived. Such studies complement archival research by providing a tangible sense of the material conditions of service and the spatial dynamics of power and proximity at court. The lives of these obscure companions also illuminate broader themes in Tudor history, such as the role of women in service, the intersection of social class and gender, and the mechanisms of patronage and loyalty. Female servants, in particular, often occupied ambiguous positions, straddling the boundaries between intimacy and subordination. Their work required not only physical labor but also emotional labor, managing the queen's moods, navigating court etiquette, and maintaining discretion. Their experiences shed light on the gendered expectations and constraints of the time, as well as the potential for agency within restrictive social structures. The unrecorded or obscure companions of Catherine Howard play a vital, though often unacknowledged, role in the story of her court and legacy. Despite the challenges posed by limited documentation, piecing together their lives enriches our understanding of Tudor court life by revealing the complex social networks and daily realities that supported royal power. These invisible figures remind us that history is a tapestry woven from many threads, including those of servants, attendants, and minor courtiers whose contributions and experiences are essential to the full picture. Their presence complicates and deepens the narrative of Catherine Howard's reign, emphasizing the human dimensions of power, loyalty, and survival in one of England's most fascinating historical periods. Catherine Howard's reign as queen consort was brief but dramatically impactful, and the circle of women who surrounded her provides a fascinating lens through which to examine the culture of female companionship at the Tudor court. To fully appreciate the nuances of Catherine's companions, it is instructive to compare them with those who served other Tudor queens, particularly Anne Boleyn and Jane Seymour. By exploring similarities and differences, we gain a richer understanding of how female companionship functioned as both a personal and political phenomenon in the highly ritualized and perilous environment of Henry VIII's court. At the heart of these comparisons lies the recognition that companionship for Tudor queens was never purely social or intimate in the modern sense. It was deeply embedded within the complex power structures of the court. Ladies-in-waiting and other female attendants occupied roles that combined friendship, service, political alliance, and surveillance. Their presence was essential not only for providing companionship to the queen but also for maintaining her public image, managing her household, and serving as intermediaries between the monarch and broader noble networks. Starting with Catherine Howard, her companions were a mixture of high-born ladies and lower-ranking attendants. Unlike Anne Boleyn, whose ladies-in-waiting were often drawn from prominent families with political clout, Catherine's circle included women whose backgrounds were more varied, reflecting her own relatively modest upbringing within the Howard family's extended network. This difference in social composition had consequences for the dynamics of Catherine's companionships and the nature of her support system. Anne Boleyn's companions, by contrast, were carefully selected from among the nobility and gentry with established court influence. Women like Jane Seymour, who later became queen, served as ladies-in-waiting to Anne, and their presence signaled alliances among noble families vying for favor. Anne's circle was thus more explicitly political, reflecting her role as a queen who actively shaped court factionalism. The loyalty of these women was often tied to broader ambitions and power struggles, as well as personal allegiance to the queen. Jane Seymour's companions represented yet another pattern. Known for her more demure and traditional role as queen, Jane's household emphasized decorum and service, with ladies-in-waiting who supported her image as a pious and modest queen. Her companions tended to maintain a lower profile compared to the more politically active and sometimes contentious circles surrounding Anne and Catherine. This difference highlights how the queen's personality and political position influenced the character of her female retinue. In terms of daily life, the companions of all three queens shared certain fundamental roles: assisting with dressing and personal care, attending to the queen's needs during public appearances, and participating in court ceremonies. Yet the interpersonal dynamics varied. Catherine Howard's companions were often involved in more intimate and secretive relationships with the queen, shaped by the informal and sometimes scandalous nature of Catherine's queenship. This intimacy could foster strong personal loyalty but also created vulnerabilities, as evidenced by the scandals that ultimately engulfed Catherine and some of her ladies. The culture of female companionship in the Tudor court was marked by a delicate balance of trust and competition. Ladies-in-waiting could be confidantes and protectors but also rivals and informants. This duality is evident across the reigns of all three queens but played out differently depending on the queen's personality and political context. Catherine's companions, for instance, faced intense scrutiny and suspicion after her downfall, reflecting the precariousness of their positions and the potential dangers of close association with a disgraced queen. Moreover, the broader cultural expectations of women at court shaped these companionships. Loyalty and discretion were prized virtues, but so were ambition and the ability to navigate the shifting alliances of the court. Female companions were often involved in the transmission of gossip and information, making them key players in the informal power networks that influenced decisions and perceptions. Their social skills and political acumen could significantly affect their own fortunes and those of the queen they served. Catherine Howard's friends fit into these patterns in complex ways. Some, like Jane Boleyn, Lady Rochford, had long-standing court experience and connections that linked them to the previous queen and Boleyn. This continuity underscores how female companionship transcended individual reigns, forming part of a continuous web of Tudor court life. Yet Jane's fate, executed alongside Catherine, also highlights the risks of such continuity when political tides turned. Other companions of Catherine were less politically connected, which may have contributed to their vulnerability but also reflected Catherine's own social position. Her reliance on a mix of noble and lower-status women created a distinctive companion group that combined elements of both intimacy and instability. The loyalty of these women was tested by the pressures of court intrigue and the ultimate tragedy of Catherine's fall. In contrast, the companions of Anne Boleyn operated within a more overtly political framework. Their alliances often aligned with factional interests, and their support of the Queen could be instrumental in advancing their family's positions. This political dimension meant that Anne's ladies were sometimes caught in factional disputes that could be as dangerous as any direct royal scandal. The intensity of these political rivalries shaped the nature of female companionship under Anne in contrast with the more personal and less formally politicized bonds observed in Catherine's circle. Jane Seymour's companions, while less politically prominent, still engaged in careful management of the Queen's public image and court relations. Their role in reinforcing Jane's reputation for virtue and modesty illustrates how female companionship could be harnessed to embody and project a Queen's desired identity. This strategic aspect of companionship contrasts with Catherine's more informal and emotionally charged friendships, revealing different models of female support at court. An important insight from these comparisons is that female companionship at the Tudor court was a multifaceted institution that adapted to the needs and personalities of each queen. It combined elements of friendship, duty, political alliance, and personal survival. The companions acted as both mirrors and makers of the Queen's image and power, shaping perceptions inside and outside the court. Catherine's companions stand out in this broader culture for their blend of youthful intimacy and tragic vulnerability. Unlike Anne's politically savvy retinue or Jane's decorous household, Catherine's circle was characterized by its closeness and emotional intensity, shaped by the Queen's own youth and the precariousness of her position. This intimacy, while offering genuine friendship and support, also exposed Catherine and her friends to greater risks amid the ruthless politics of Henry VIII's court. Furthermore, Catherine's companions illustrate the sometimes overlooked role of less formalized networks of female friendship and support. While Tudor court life often revolved around formal patronage and factional alliances, informal bonds of trust and companionship were equally important. These relationships could provide emotional sustenance but also become entangled in court intrigues, demonstrating the dual nature of female companionship in this period. In sum, comparing Catherine Howard's companions with those of Anne Boleyn and Jane Seymour reveals both continuity and variation in the culture of female companionship at the Tudor court. While all queens relied on women for support, companionship, and service, the composition, dynamics, and political implications of their retinues differed according to the Queen's personality, status, and political context. Catherine's friends embodied a more personal and vulnerable form of companionship, shaped by the particular circumstances of her queenship, while Anne's and Jane's companions reflected more explicitly political and symbolic roles. These patterns offer broader insights into the nature of power, gender, and social relations in Tudor England. Female companionship was not only about friendship or service, it was a crucial mechanism through which queens exercised influence, managed their households, and negotiated the perilous world of court politics. The experiences of Catherine Howard's friends thus illuminate the human dimensions of history, revealing how relationships shaped and were shaped by the broader forces of power and fate at one of England's most dramatic royal courts. The stories of Catherine Howard's companions offer a profound insight into the nature of female relationships within one of the most dangerous and politically charged environments in English history, the Tudor court. At its core, this network of women reflects a delicate balance of friendship, loyalty, ambition, and survival set against the backdrop of a patriarchal society where women's lives and fortunes were often precariously dependent on their connections and favor with powerful men. By examining the narratives of these companions, we uncover broader themes that resonate far beyond the individual histories, revealing the intricate social fabric that shaped the lives of women at the highest levels of Tudor power. Female friendship and solidarity emerge as a vital yet fragile element in the lives of Catherine Howard's companions. The Tudor court was an environment saturated with political intrigue, suspicion, and ever-shifting alliances, making genuine friendship difficult to sustain. Yet, amid these challenges, women like Catherine and her attendants sought and forged bonds of companionship that provided emotional support and a semblance of stability. These friendships were not merely social niceties, they were often lifelines in a world where trust was rare and betrayal common. The Queen's circle, for all its complexities and flaws, embodied moments of sincere solidarity that helped its members navigate the relentless pressures of court life. However, this female solidarity was never straightforward or unconditionally safe. The intersection of personal loyalty and political expediency complicated these relationships deeply. Women in Catherine's circle had to constantly negotiate the tension between supporting each other personally and advancing, or at least protecting, their own political positions. Loyalty to a queen or to a close companion could elevate a woman's status and security but also put her at risk if the political tides turned. This was starkly illustrated in the fate of many of Catherine's companions, who suffered dire consequences after her downfall. Their experiences highlight how political expediency could override personal bonds, making friendships contingent and vulnerable to betrayal. The Tudor court, as a fundamentally patriarchal institution, shaped and constrained women's networks in profound ways. Women's power was mediated through their relationships, be it as wives, daughters, attendants, or companions, and their agency was circumscribed by male authority. In such a system, female networks could serve as both sources of strength and sites of vulnerability. On one hand, these networks allowed women to exert influence, share information, and offer mutual protection. On the other hand, they were fragile under the constant surveillance and control exerted by men in positions of power, from the king himself to male courtiers and officials tasked with monitoring court behavior. The vulnerability of these women's networks was compounded by the inherent risks of association. Being close to the queen could bring prestige and opportunity, but also suspicion and danger. The fall of Catherine Howard vividly demonstrates this dynamic. Her companions, who were her allies and confidantes, became targets of royal wrath and political retribution. This episode underscores how women's solidarity at court was always shadowed by the possibility of sudden reversal, a precariousness born of the intersection between personal loyalty and the ruthless realpolitik of Tudor governance. Within these constraints, the dynamics of trust, betrayal, and survival strategies among women were extraordinarily complex. Trust was both essential and elusive. Companions had to discern whom they could confide in and when, aware that secrets could become weapons in the volatile environment of court intrigue. Betrayal could be motivated by fear, ambition, or coercion, and often involved difficult choices between self-preservation and loyalty. Some women chose to align with emerging powers or rival factions, while others attempted to maintain neutrality or retreat from dangerous entanglements. These varied strategies illustrate the multiplicity of responses available to women attempting to navigate a world where missteps could mean ruin or death. Survival in this context was not simply about physical safety but also about preserving honor, status, and future prospects. Women employed a range of tactics: careful discretion, forging new alliances, leveraging family connections, or displaying piety and humility to protect themselves. The capacity to adapt to changing circumstances was crucial, as was an acute awareness of the court's shifting power dynamics. For many of Catherine's companions, survival meant enduring social stigma, navigating exile or disgrace, or re-establishing their positions through marriages or service in other households. These stories challenge any simplistic notions of female relationships at court as either purely loyal or wholly duplicitous. Instead, they reveal a nuanced spectrum where friendship, rivalry, cooperation, and conflict coexisted. Women could be allies one day and adversaries the next. The boundaries between trust and betrayal were fluid and contingent on context. This complexity reflects the broader realities of a court culture where personal relationships were inseparable from political calculations. In a larger historical context, the experiences of Catherine Howard's companions highlight the persistent struggle for female agency within patriarchal structures. Despite severe limitations, women found ways to influence their environments, support each other, and assert their identities. Their networks, though vulnerable, were vital arenas of social and emotional life that helped shape the politics of the Tudor court. Furthermore, these narratives emphasize the human cost of power struggles centered on queenship. The personal tragedies of Catherine and her companions remind us that behind the grand events of history lie intimate stories of friendship, loyalty, pain, and resilience. These women's lives, often overshadowed by the actions of kings and nobles, deserve recognition as integral to the fabric of Tudor history. The stories of Catherine Howard's companions illuminate the intertwined themes of female friendship, loyalty, vulnerability, and survival in the perilous environment of the Tudor court. Their experiences reveal how women navigated the fraught intersection of personal bonds and political realities, managing the complex dynamics of trust and betrayal amid a society defined by patriarchal power. These narratives deepen our understanding of the social and emotional worlds of Tudor women, highlighting the resilience and complexity of their relationships in one of England's most dramatic historical epics.